Not My First Language, a memoir. Written and read by Reena Arora-Sánchez. Two. I wrestled with the key to my front door as scenes from the Catholic memorial and Mass fought to be recalled. I resisted them. I didn't want anything available for playback when I was alone with my thoughts. The one thing for which I was grateful was just how much love surrounded us during that time. Love for Mom, love for my father, love for the adult children who dutifully greeted visitors with broken smiles, thanking every guest for returning the love she'd so freely given them. Whether they lived down the block or on the other side of the world, people from all walks of Mom's life insisted on honoring the woman who'd meant nearly as much to them as she had to me. Hundreds lined up during the viewing to greet our family and express their condolences, not to mention share an anecdote, or 5, about how she'd changed their lives. When I was recovering from surgery, she cooked for my entire family for a week. Who knew she had the time with all of you at home? "Oh, you're her daughter in North Carolina, aren't you? She talked about how smart you were all the time." She called you her Spanish scholar and loved that you were bilingual. She was so proud of you. At the memorial service, I read a letter to her before placing it in the casket alongside the rose-colored flip phone she never wanted to upgrade. Dear Mom, I understand if you don't have time to read this letter right now. You're probably busy catching up with Grandma and making lots of new friends. Mother Teresa, Jackie O, and of course, John Lennon and George Harrison. In fact, I bet you, John, and George are laughing at Kanye West fans right now. You just couldn't live in a world where people didn't know who Paul McCartney was, could you? That might seem like an insensitive way to start a letter like this, but I know you understand. No matter what you faced in your life, good or bad, you always used humor to keep perspective. You never allowed sorrow to dictate your actions, not even when you were taking your final breaths, and you wouldn't want us to either. Your signature wit and strength have left a lasting impression on all of us. Dad, Anita, Steve, Monica, and me, as well as those who were blessed to call you a daughter, sister, friend, aunt, mother-in-law, and most recently, Nani. Like them, I won't remember the battle you lost. I'll remember how you fought. And for 8 years, you fought. Like a true New Yorker, you flat out refused to give up until you absolutely could not fight anymore. Not many people's response to a bad prognosis would be, "Oh yeah, I'll show you." And that's one of the many reasons why you've inspired us all. Another reason was your devotion to family. You left a career in nursing to care for us kids at home, and the truth is that not many children are lucky enough to have a mom like you. Protective, playful, and proud. The kind of mom who kept us in line but also loved to have fun, whether we were at home or abroad. The kind of mom who never gave us a house key because we simply didn't need one. The kind of mom who, after we'd left for college, would call 3 weeks before an impending visit to get our food order, and then call again and again and again just to make sure you didn't miss anything, especially Steve's chicken pot pie. This all speaks to your selflessness. You always put others' needs and wants before your own. That was your happiness. That's my mother. You weren't scared of going to heaven because you knew Grandma would be there to greet you. But we know you were sad and angry to leave your family. We're sad and angry too. Not at you, of course, because you did everything in your power to try to beat this awful illness. We're sad you're gone. Your absence has left a permanent hole in our hearts. We will miss you and think of you every day, especially during weddings, graduations, and births, when we would give anything to have you there. But you will live on in everything that we do, from the foods we cook, to the life choices we make, to the way we treat each other. All of it will continue to be influenced by the lessons you taught us. Your presence will always be with us, no matter what. Back in 2004, I wanted to send you a Mother's Day card while I was studying abroad in England, but I learned that nothing was available in May because they celebrate moms in March. I didn't put 2 and 2 together until it was too late, so instead, I bought you a birthday card, crossed out the words happy birthday, and wrote Happy Mother's Day. Also inside was a pin that declared you the world's greatest mum. You loved that pin. You put it on display, you wore it whenever the mood struck you, and from that moment on, every birthday or Mother's Day card I ever gave you reiterated how you were, without question, the world's greatest mum. You always will be. I finally understand what it means to love someone enough to let them go. You're free now. I will miss you every day, but I am relieved that you're no longer hurting. Love, Reena. The framed memories hadn't moved from the positions I'd painstakingly measured along my lavender walls in my Charlotte townhome. The stagnant air that greeted me after 2 weeks away was expected. In the chaos of racing to her side again after celebrating New Year's Eve with friends along the Carolina shore, I'd somehow managed to put things in order. Yet nothing was the same. I froze in my entryway for a while, debating what to do next. Just go upstairs, my spirit insisted. Start over tomorrow. A mix of exhaustion and relief enveloped me as I collapsed on top of my bed and fixated on the cathedral ceiling of my room. So much had happened here since I'd graduated from Syracuse University and moved to the Queen City for my first real job as a news producer back in 2005. I thought I'd be married to a successful man and raising 2 well-behaved kids by now, as had once been expected of me. The universe had other ideas, though. Too many unfinished lessons from relationships, breakups, parties, graduate school, job changes, illnesses, and deaths. The death, in particular. As I tried to dull the vision of memories that felt the need to resurface at that very moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Van. I'd texted him upon landing to let him know I was home and ready to move on with my life. An hour later, I received a response. Glad you made it. How are you? Okay, I guess, I typed back, craving his empathy. I'm tired and ready for some normalcy. I can imagine, appeared after the bubbles vanished. We met through an online dating site just a couple of weeks before the doctors confirmed that my mother didn't have much time left. Despite hardly knowing one another, Van had insisted on sticking by me to distract me from reality. He admittedly wasn't my type physically, and there was no suggestion of love at first sight, but his humor, patience, and natural curiosity made him more appealing with each story we swapped. The all-day texting became a welcome addition to my daily routine. When Mom refused to lose her battle with cancer in the middle of another brutal Ohio winter, Dad took her to South Carolina to spend her final days at a family friend's house. In a surprising twist of fate, Van lived in that same town and welcomed me there with open arms. Once a week, I'd table my suffering at a trendy wine bar with him, during a walk in the park with his Siberian husky, or on a tour of the house he was flipping for himself. He even rushed to my side when my car battery biffed it in the middle of the night and didn't hesitate to confidently introduce himself to my father, a bold choice that signaled he was in this for more than just a good time. After all, Van was Asian too. East Asian, but still rooted in the same part of the world as half of my family. It is well understood across the continent that meeting parents is an act of bravery, a calculated move that clearly demonstrates serious intent. Were we ready to get married? Of course not. Could we be ready at some point? Given how he was acting, I didn't doubt it. 2 months of this closeness during the most difficult period of my life led me to ask the inevitable. Where was this going? Van wasn't caught off guard by the inquiry. On the contrary, he was quite calm and collected when I asked as he dropped me off after dinner. There was no trace of anxiety across the baby face scarred from adolescent acne. He smiled and said he felt it best for me to focus on my family in that moment, though he assured me he wasn't going anywhere. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable, mature response. Probably the most mature "what are we doing" conversation I'd ever had with a man in my 31 years. I accepted it and didn't push for more. Van and I didn't speak much during the week we laid my mother to rest at the beginning of January 2015. In fact, Our lines of communication had slowed significantly since Christmas, about a week after the "what's going on here" discussion. So the night I returned to the Carolinas from my mother's funeral in Ohio, I tried steering the conversation more toward him. The focus had been on me for so long, and I wanted to understand where his head was now. I was also hoping for the same emotional interference he'd so effortlessly run before. "Please distract me," I begged internally as my thumbs tapped the digital keyboard. Ominous bubbles appeared on the other end of the thread before I could finish. I got an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of my stomach and erased what I'd started writing, watching the tiny circles dance for what seemed like hours. I froze when the sheer length of his next message revealed itself. "I've been thinking, it seems like you're ready for something serious, and I'm just not there," it began. I'm just not there. I ruminated on that phrase before reading and rereading and rereading the rest. He was breaking up with me. Over text. The day I came home from my mother's funeral. Something inside of me snapped as I processed the audacity of his timing. For 3 months, he'd been nothing short of the knight in shining armor trope, a mature man with a great career and plans for the future who actively went on a website seeking a committed partner. He then chose to maintain said relationship knowing it was the most difficult season of my life up to that point. Why couldn't he have simply said back in October, "Hey, it was great meeting you, but I can see you have a lot on your plate"? Why the dinners? Why the car makeout sessions? Why the invitation to his company's Christmas party? None of it made sense. If this were the me from 3 months ago, I would have pleaded with him to think it over. I might have called him and insisted on hearing his voice, perhaps attempt to talk him out of his feelings, reminding him of the amazing time we spent together and the chemistry we'd developed at a time when I hadn't considered welcoming romance into my life. I'd say things were going to be different now, that I was ready to move on. And maybe after that, he'd reconsider. I wouldn't be sure if his compliance arose from guilt or if things would change over time, but it was okay. I'd manage that. I just thought our relationship without looming death deserved a chance. But the me who read his message was motherless, drained, and broken. This version of me simply didn't have the energy to fight losing battles anymore. This me knew how she wanted to respond to Van, but held on to her words for a few minutes before hitting send. "Well, I certainly don't want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with me," were my last words to him. Within seconds, he replied, "I completely understand." What? I rolled my eyes, dropped my phone on the beige carpeted floor, and stretched my limbs across my queen-size mattress. I didn't want to share my bed anyway. The flash of my cell phone hit the corner of my eye from the nightstand the following Friday night. I'd put my ringer on silent while immersing myself in the latest celebrity tell-all. The message was from a good friend for whom it was worth putting down my book, and I couldn't help but affectionately read the text in her distinct accent. "Amiga, what you doing tonight?" My trusted circle knew self-pity wasn't my style, and they were all doing their best to continue supporting me without making me feel even worse. But by 7 p.m., I was already unapologetically in my pajamas with Jennifer Lopez's True Love stacked among several other memoirs of its kind on my nightstand. "Hey, amiga," I typed back. "Not feeling so great, just taking it easy." "Oh, I understand," my friend responded without stating the obvious. "Go rest, amiga," she continued. "You coming to my party next week? My brother go back to Santiago soon." "Sure, amiga. See you then." I put my cell phone back down. No more interruptions, I promised myself. My adult life up to that point had been a haze of happy hours, birthday celebrations, impromptu dinners, and dates. Some good, some awful, some excellent networking opportunities. I had classic FOMO in my 20s and almost never missed an excuse to participate in Charlotte's booming social scene. Drinking and laughing the night away were far preferable to being home alone with my thoughts, though my credit card bills at the time suggested otherwise. But after the funeral, a shift manifested in the core of my being. I suddenly wasn't worried about being included in everyone's plans, nor was I obsessing about what my friends were doing without me. I didn't care about being in a relationship or date night. FOMO was not a thing for me anymore. I'd spent so much time trying to keep my mom alive that nothing felt like it was as important once she was gone. We were all going to die anyway. I was simply over the things I thought I needed to be happy. What did bring me comfort through much of my life was reading, especially during my adolescence when the whole family was home and one person, Dad, controlled the big screen TV in the living room. I'd scurry from the blaring, angry voices of cable news gurus arguing over the state of the country and snuggle under my multicolored comforter in my bedroom, losing myself in the inviting silence of literature. Reena is a voracious reader, I once heard my mother brag to a friend of hers over the phone. I assume she didn't know about the journals I kept in high school venting about how awful and unfair she and my father were. I mean, they couldn't have possibly understood what it was like to be a teenager in the year 1999. Reading and writing failed to spark joy in me after I completed my first master's degree, however. For 3 years, almost all of my free time was spent analyzing case studies and editing abstracts to produce a lengthy, thoughtful thesis fit for academia. In the summer of 2010, I couldn't pick up a book without feeling exhausted, and I rode that wave of laziness in the years that followed. Except that one time I tried and failed out of an MBA program. Numb from grief, I was desperately searching for ways to recenter myself after Mom's death, and I thought one way might be to get back into the habit of reading for fun. I've always believed in the healing power of storytelling, of the value of learning from one another's experiences. That's mostly why I went into journalism. I knew I wanted to write in some capacity, and sharing important current events from around the world every day in public newscasts felt like the most responsible way to do that. I always found memoirs and autobiographies of famous people to be especially therapeutic. Getting a glimpse of the trials and tribulations they overcame behind the scenes, things the public doesn't always see in the carefully staged world of Hollywood public relations, made me realize how some of the most celebrated people on the planet were not perfect, nor did money necessarily bring them happiness. I studied the cover of True Love with great anticipation of its content. A beautiful superstar with an electrifying smile and flowing hair exuded confidence and bliss, though I didn't know exactly how much truth was behind that projection. I was aware that Lopez had been a fly girl on In Living Color before her breakout role as Selena in the legendary biopic. I also knew her as one half of the former Bennifer, Part 1, and someone who was continually breaking barriers for Latin talent in Hollywood. With everything she'd accomplished, Lopez seemed to be the most self-assured, content person alive. I figured she could teach me a thing or two about that. As I lost myself in page after page of stories from my mother's native New York City to the world stage, a reflection about self-care stopped me cold. Lopez recounted how someone once lit up a cigarette in front of her during an event while she was pregnant with her twins, and she instinctively moved away to protect her unborn babies. Seems like normal behavior for any decent mother, of course. But what Lopez realized in that moment was that if she hadn't been pregnant, she probably wouldn't have flinched. She would have accepted the other person's unhealthy, disgusting habit and silently dealt with it for her own discomfort. She'd loved the little people growing inside of her so much already that she subconsciously started doing things for them she hadn't previously considered for herself. Hence, she was coming to terms with the meaning of true love and recognizing that, while she adored her children, she wasn't protecting herself in the same way. I slammed the book shut and met my own gaze in the mirror across from my bed. Tears erupted before I could stop them. That short anecdote from a stranger's life had stirred up emotions in me I'd refused to acknowledge, and one brilliant takeaway emerged. With an intense sense of purpose, I threw my blanket toward the wall against which my bed had been pushed and raced to the bathroom. I spotted a tube of cherry red lipstick on the counter among the drugstore makeup that I hadn't touched in weeks. A weight began to lift from my chest as the mistakes and regrets of my past infiltrated my consciousness. It wasn't fair that Mom was gone. It wasn't fair that I'd gained back all the weight I'd worked so hard to lose before my sister's wedding. It wasn't fair that I barely made enough money to cover the bills. It wasn't fair that Mr. Right was still nowhere to be found. None of it was fair. But it was where I found myself. I had a choice. I could succumb to self-pity and allow it to control me, or I could finally put myself first, forge a new path, and create real change in my life. With a heavy hand, I scribbled a phrase rampant throughout true love across the mirror and enclosed it with a messy heart, vowing never to let anyone or anything come between my goals and me again. I capped the lipstick and tossed it onto the counter before stepping back to admire my new decor. No, my new mantra. Amate, a Spanish command to love yourself. This chapter reflects my personal recollections and is not intended to serve as a factual record. Memory is imperfect, and others might recall events differently. Certain names, details, and dialogue have been altered or reconstructed for clarity and privacy.